Welcome back to Just Vetting, where we go beyond the transaction to explore what it really takes to build, grow, and transition a successful veterinary practice. Today's guest is someone who has not only participated in this profession, but helped shape how it thinks about business, leadership, and ownership. Dr. Peter Weinstein is a veterinarian, a practice owner, consultant, educator, and one of the most influential voices in veterinary medicine today. From starting as a kennel assistant to leading a major veterinary organization and advising practices nationwide, his perspective spans every level of the profession. He is also the founder of Paw Consulting, co-author of the E-Myth Veterinarian, and co-host of Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, where he addresses some of the most pressing and often uncomfortable issues facing veterinary medicine today. Peter, welcome to Just Vetting.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be with you and Just Vetting. Is this the first time you've done a podcast with another namesake?
It is. Yes, it is. Usually I go by Pete and repeat when I have another namesake. That's good. That's good.
Well, you can be Pete, and I tell anybody that if they call me Pete, they won't be repeating it, at least not to me.
I love it. So Peter, you've worked in virtually every role inside a veterinary hospital. What did those early experiences teach you that many veterinarians miss today?
Yeah, I mean, starting back as a kennel kid way back in the 70s, it was interesting. It really showed me how to hold my breath, because cleaning cages during the parvo epidemic surely got my attention. It taught me that I would have to do things that I didn't necessarily want to do to become a veterinarian. It showed me how hard people who were in the profession had to work, and it gave me a really good foundation of the commitment that veterinarians made to being veterinarians. I mean, it was a 6-day work week, client expectations. And back when I got started, there wasn't nearly the technology that we have now or the resources that we have now. So I think there's a lot of grit and resilience that came from getting up on Sunday mornings in the winter in New York and finding my way to Port Washington and cleaning cages and walking dogs and doing kennels and having the Christmas shifts and the New Year's shifts. And I think it was a very strong foundation for everything that led up to where I am at the moment.
How old were you during that period of time?
Started volunteering at 15 and started getting paid at 16.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't have the same experience in terms of working in a veterinary hospital, but I can remember those years as a 15-year-old or 16-year-old working, doing whatever I was doing, pushing carts out of supermarket or whatnot, outside in the cold. I think it builds character. I don't think a lot of the kids today do things like that. And you obviously you get a real appreciation for how hard, like you said, the veterinarians are working in a practice from doing what you're doing. When did you realize that being like a good or even a great clinician is not like the same as building a successful business? I know that has obviously had to take time and observations and experience on your part.
Yeah, I think when I first got out of school, and even through veterinary school, most of my focus through veterinary school was actually on the equine side of things. Many people don't know that, but I did a lot of my rotations riding equine in Central Illinois, where I went to veterinary school at the University of Illinois, and did some work in companion animal as well. But once I graduated and started working for other veterinarians in Orange County, California, I got a good diversity of what veterinary practice was like. And I realized that good medicine came first and good business would come with good medicine. And I also realized that good medicine was an equal part of good business. I think you have to be able to have an understanding of what your client needs are, what your team needs are, to be able to deliver good medicine. And so it's really understanding the balance, because in veterinary school, the 4 years of education, just like in law school, the 4 years of education teach you how to become a technically adept attorney,
Right.
but doesn't necessarily teach you how to become a leader or a good business person. So I really do think that in many ways, veterinary school sets you up to be a good doctor, but doesn't really set you up to be a good business owner. And we see that in other professions as well. And
Yeah.
law is no exception, accounting is no exception, et cetera.
You know, the good thing is with that, at least with the veterinary profession, and I think they've somewhat recognized that, if you would agree with me, and they have these student, veterinary business organizations where they'll bring in professionals like yourself or other professionals in the industry. They realize there's a need for it. I've had an opportunity to speak at some of those organizations. And the students are pretty candid with me, saying, there's a lot going on at school. Yes, what you have to say is we think it's important, but that's really not what I'm focused on right now. I'm trying to focus on, graduating. And it was an interesting perspective. But in law school, you don't have none of that. There's nothing like that prepares you for the business side of being an attorney.
Yeah, the VBMA, Veterinary Business Management Association, which is in all of the veterinary schools, it was not in existence when I was in vet school. It just started right around 2003, 2004, thereabouts. And it's the second largest club on campus. It's focused on the business side of things and entrepreneurialism, and really helping supplement the coursework that is offered in the curriculum. But you're absolutely correct. We as veterinarians are measured during our academic years on our livers and kidneys and hearts, oh my,
Right.
and not on profit and loss statements and tax returns and communication skills.
Yeah. Listen, it's a start. At least they're getting exposed to it, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
What led you to pursue, an MBA, and how did that, shape your approach to practice management?
I opened my hospital as a startup 3 years out of school because I was working for other doctors, and I saw what they were doing, and I thought that I could do what they were doing. I was a pretty good clinician. I was pretty good with clients and pretty good with staff. And I just figured that, maybe I could run my own business. And this is a real story. My boss and I were driving to a educational program, lunch meeting or something to that effect. And we were driving by a shopping center that was just being built in Laguna Hills, California. There were going to be 50,000 homes servicing this shopping center. There was one suite left in the shopping center. And I said, man, that would be a great place to put a veterinary hospital. And one thing led to another, and with a little help, a little guidance with some accountants, some attorneys, and some friends, about 6 months later, we had a veterinary hospital up and running. And it was then that I realized what I didn't know. And that was what a profit and loss statement was, and
Right.
what I should or shouldn't be saying to people, and how to keep inventory. And so there was a level of burnout that I was going through, just trying to keep all the balls in the air. And that wasn't just as a result of neutering, that was just all the balls that were associated with.
That's good. That's good. I
you.
like it. That's a good one.
Yes, thank you.
Man.
So it was just, and I realized that in veterinary school, where we got 8 hours of an elective taught on a Friday afternoon in a dark room by video, I better get a little bit more knowledge. And there wasn't a lot of practice management education going on until I realized that there were these big conferences out there, like back then it was Western Veterinary Conference and North American. So I went back to school at night while running my hospital 6 days a week. I would close early for class days. We would work from 8 to 12, which usually meant 8 to 2, and then I'd go home, take a nap, and go to school for 4 hours once a week. And the MBA was life-changing for me because it opened my eyes to things that I had never thought about throughout my career to that point in time. I mean, there are just things that you learn about that are not part of pre-vet curriculum or life.
Right, right. And you think about it, you went and got an MBA, and so many practice owners don't do that, and they're thrust into ownership and learning, as you say, on the fly, basically. I guess kind of on that theme, what surprised you the most that no one prepared you for? You kind of answered it, I guess, as a practice owner. But is there anything else that really kind of stands out? You think back on it?
Well, I think the thing that I learned that was important that we never really learn about is leadership.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have this whole group of people that are part of your team that are dependent upon you, and you are dependent upon them. In veterinary school, we really don't learn about leadership unless you become a leader of a club or something else within the university. And so when you own a business, you have people that are dependent upon you, and this is your staff. And you have people that are dependent upon you. Those are your clients. You have people that are dependent upon you, and those are your vendors. And so it's really understanding that you go to school as an individual and you own a business and you have other stakeholders that are a part of that business that you impact. And I think we in veterinary medicine don't always think about all of the people that we touch metaphorically,
Mm-hmm.
and that are influenced by the work that we do. And I think the most important thing I learned in the MBA was how other leaders lead and how they create a vision and a direction. And then with that vision and direction and great leadership and some managementship, they're able to become Apple Computers, Harley Davidson, Kaiser Permanente, or McDonald's. And I think we sometimes get so busy being busy that we really don't pay attention to all of the nuances that go into being an entrepreneur, running a small business, and the number of people and the variety of people that we touch every day.
Yeah. Staying on that leadership theme, you correct me if I'm wrong. You advocate for what I would say a doctor-centered to team-centered practices, correct? That's something you talk about. Why is that so important, and how does that impact leadership, culture, in your mind?
So to clarify, I am an advocate for team-centered delivery of veterinary medicine. And what I mean by that is that to be able to accomplish everything we do in practice requires other people on our team to do work to support us. Because as a doctor, I only have to do 3 things by law. Certain states it's 4: diagnose, prescribe, and do surgery. And the more I can focus on those, which should be my clinical strengths, and the more my team can do other things, going to Costco, doing inventory, checking clients in, checking clients out, cleaning cages, the more they can do that, the more I can focus on what is going to give me the greatest return, which is to be a doctor first, a leader and a manager second. And so a team-centric business model means identifying, training, retaining, onboarding, orienting, and giving resources to your team to ultimately be successful so that they can take on leadership roles themselves and that we can give them careers in the profession and not just jobs. And that if we look at veterinary medicine in a servant leadership fashion, we can't do it by ourselves. We need the team to do it with us. And it can't be doctor-centric. It has to be team-centric. Oh, and by the way, clients are part of our team. So we have to have client-centric and team-centric business models ultimately to be successful. And yes, the doctor provides the doctoring, but everybody else should be part of decision making and visioning and ultimately driving the business to long-term success.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple times that the clients are part of the team too. It's all one at the end of the day. Where
Yes.
do you see practices? In your experience in your consulting role, where do you see practice owners falling short when it comes to retention and team well-building, well-being, not well-building?
Well, they go back. Actually, it was a Freudian slip because team building will contribute to team well-being, and so I think it starts with some basic law stuff like job descriptions and employee policy manuals and all of the different things. It continues into training manuals and operations manuals, and it goes into selecting people. I was reading a book about the restaurant industry that essentially says you should be choosing for more than 50% of people by personality and the remainder on skills, because you can't make people nice and you can't make them client centric, but you can teach them how to answer a phone or enter an invoice. So we need to learn how to choose the right people for the culture of our practice, give them the tools to be successful, support them through education and formalized training, and make sure that they are feeling supported and respected, given responsibilities so that they can grow, given recognition for the work that they do, because recognition, responsibility, and respect will get retention, more so than just remuneration. I think
Right.
sometimes we try to buy people's careers instead of giving them what they really need, which is the ability to feel like they have an important role within the business. It really
Right.
starts with hiring correctly and taking the time to set them up to be successful with career paths, through education, through support. And we should be spending less time looking for things that they're doing wrong and more time focusing on rewarding them for doing things right. But we tend to focus on what they do wrong more so than what they do right.
Yeah, very true. You mentioned the policy manuals and job descriptions, and sometimes when I'm talking to clients about like an employee handbook that they need, they're like, "Wow, what do I need to have that for?" And I sometimes will use the analogy of the Super Bowl. It seems like, and I'm not, I do watch the Super Bowl. It's probably the one football game I'll sit down and watch with my family and friends. Can you imagine going to the Super Bowl and there's no rules? Everybody's just running into each other. How boring or confusing that game would be. It's the same with a business. That policy manual I look at as a communication device between the owner and the employees, where the expectations are. So everybody understands what the rules are. And if you have an issue, got an open door policy to come to me, similar to what you're talking about with the job descriptions. These are the expectations that we have for you. You meet those expectations, you're part of the team, part of the culture. You mentioned, about, being successful in terms of I hear mentorship. You didn't say the word, but mentoring is a big part of hiring right and then mentoring those people from the front, reception desk, back, to the surgery and the operating room, mentoring. What's the expectation in your practice? You're setting a tone as a practice owner. I guess if you got a broken culture in a practice, what's one or two things that you'd recommend that a practice owner, what would you focus on? You think, because culture, what I find in this industry, which is unique, and I've been practicing longer now than I'd like to admit. But here in the vet space, I've been fortunate enough to, for 15 years now. And culture here is so important to our clients. Where somebody's going to sell their business, maybe a widget company, how much money am I going to get? Here, yeah, money is important to everybody. It's human nature. But what I find just as important in those conversations I'm having with clients, how are they going to treat my staff? What's the culture going to be like? It is not this first. It's the second question that we're talking about when a practice is going to transition. It's really interesting because it's the caring nature, of you and your colleagues.
A culture, to me, well, if the toxic culture, I'm going to start looking at the top, because people emulate what they see from a leadership standpoint. And whether that is the coach of the football team, a politician, or a business owner, many toxic cultures start at the top, either because there is a lack of leadership, too much of a narcissistic, egocentric doctor. Yes, we do have narcissistic,
Yeah,
egocentric doctors,
right.
and a failure to recognize that you cannot be successful without the people surrounding you. And so I think a lot of toxicity starts at the top and trickles down. And then, I mean, I made the mistake, and I try to teach this as well. You don't need to hire people like you. You need to hire people that work well within the practice culture. And so in many cases, the more your team is involved with choosing their coworkers, the more likely you will build a collaborative culture, because it's not about people like me. I don't need more type A, anally retentive micromanagers. I need collaborative people who can work together. I use the metaphor of the crew boat of 8 people have to be in sync. They have to have a cadence. And really, the job of the leadership in the practice is to be the coxswain at the front of the boat that sets the cadence, that sets the speed, but lets the rest of the team do the work, because they're supporting them by saying stroke, stroke, stroke. And the goal that is set by the leadership, the vision that is set by the leadership, is to get down the river or the lake as fast as you can. It's not about looking at boat number, at crew person number 3 and saying faster. It's about everybody working together to build that sequence and cadence, and it's about the right people who were chosen by those 8 people to work together because they believe in each other, and they believe in the vision, they believe in the direction, they believe in the purpose. And if you put all of those things together and you've got a great reason, a great why, and a great purpose for what you do every day, people will come to work in New York when it's 20 below and 16 inches of snow, and they'll go to work in Phoenix when it's 120 degrees, etc. So culture is, to me, foundational. People are foundational. There was a post this morning on LinkedIn about the plethora of innovations that are out there. We as a profession don't need more innovation. We need more people, because you need the people there to buy into the innovation, to drive the innovation. And that comes from leadership and culture.
Yeah, it's you talk about the boat and the 8 guys in the boat. It's a great analogy, because I'm picturing that. It's everybody's got to be in sync, no matter how good any one of those individuals are. Unless they're all in sync, you're not going to win. It's a great. Looking at the future of veterinary ownership. Where are we moving towards? And you and I have talked about this, and I've heard you speak about this. Are we moving towards fewer independent owners, or simply ownership models? Now, what's your thoughts on that?
What my hopes are is that we're moving towards more independent hospital owners, whether it's startups or acquisitions. There's a very large pool of hospitals owned by baby boomers that are going to be looking for an exit. And there's a group of veterinary students coming out, many of whom are VBMA alums, who are a good pool of buyers for those businesses. I think there will always be some corporate component of practice ownership. I don't think that the 25% or so of the hospitals that are owned by corporations are going to go away. I think we've seen possibly the peak of commitment to where they are right now. Most of the best practices have been purchased already. There are a lot of what you and I from Vet Partners call no-low hospitals out there, no value, low value hospitals that are a great opportunity for somebody who wants to buy something maybe for a lower price and put a little work in and make it better. I'm old school. You know, I grew up reading James Herriot and reading him driving his car through the dales of the UK and making house calls and kind of doing everything. So I'm a big advocate for independent hospitals. Transparently, I did sell my hospital to a corporation, but I do think now, because this is a profession built upon relationships and built upon trust, I think we have to find ways to continue to grow those relationships and grow that trust. And there's, in my opinion, no better way to do it than through a mom and pop, or a couple of moms and a couple of pops, or just a whole bunch of moms running hospitals and meeting the needs of consumers and building relationships and taking care of pets through multi-generations of pet owners. You know, I think when I started to see the grandchildren of some of my clients, I think that showed me that, you know, that's what we're looking for, is we're looking to build those long-term relationships. So
I guess, you know, what, if you're younger, you know, you said you owned your first practice, you know, 3 years out of veterinary school. I have a handful of clients like that, but the majority are not that. They're out, they're associating a lot longer than that. You know, if you're a younger veterinarian, what should they be doing right now if they think about wanting to own a practice in the future? What would be your recommendation to them?
Number one, become a good doctor. First year out of school, get your exam room conversations down. Become comfortable speaking with clients. Become comfortable working with and leading a team. And you'll do this in the treatment area. You'll do it in surgery. Learn to trust people through training them. Be malleable enough and open-minded enough to also learn from the people with whom you work. Many of them have more experience in that practice than you have, and they can teach you the nuances of how the owners like to lead. They know the clients. Your team can make you successful, or they can make you fail. So learning how to respect your team and getting them to respect you is number one. You, just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you're going to get respected on day one. You're going to have to earn that. So learn how to respect your team. Great leaders are great listeners. Great leaders ask great questions. It's not check your freaking ego at the door. You don't know how to do everything. Be humble. Be a good doctor. Be humble with clients. And then, while you're doing that, slowly work into understanding how to run a team, how to own a business, start to understand about taxes, and start to understand about profit and loss statements and law and regulatory issues. But I would suggest the first year or two out of school, get your medicine down, get your surgery down, get your confidence up, and get help in those areas that you feel weakest. Get support, but then make sure that you continue to grow from that standpoint. And I think to be successful as an entrepreneur means building a strong foundation as a doctor first, and then as an entrepreneur second.
You know, you talk about getting help. You know, talk to me a little bit about Paw and what, you know, why you created that, what you do there, how you impact, you know, what's your impact on, you know, practices.
Well, Peter, I do a plethora of different things right now. The PAW Consulting is,
I know, I'm going to pick a
just
couple of them. I know. We'll be here all
Uh,
afternoon if we go through all of them. I know.
Probably. So PAW Consulting is really focused on education right now. I teach business and finance for the third-year veterinary students at Western. I sit on the National Advisory Board for VBMA. I am fortunate enough to be asked to speak at many different conferences, and I'm not looking, nor do I really want consulting business, coaching business. I just want to give people resources and tools so they can have fun, so they can enjoy what they're doing, so that they can spend 40 years in the field as I've done, and that at the end of that 40 years, they feel like they've made a difference and left a legacy for their family, for the community, etc. From that standpoint.
Hmm.
It has allowed me to become involved with organized veterinary medicine, which I think is extremely important in in the profession to know what's going on and to have people advocating for us at the legislative levels and the state, local, and federal. But I think right now my primary role, I think, is teaching, educating, and building a strong foundation for the next generation of veterinarians. Because as you probably know, I have a daughter who's a veterinarian 2.5 years out of school, almost 3 years out
Yes.
of school. And so I want her to have a profession that she's going to enjoy for the next 40 years as well. And that's just one of the multitude of things that I do.
You mentioned about your daughter, and I was gonna ask you how your perspective on the future of um, future ownership has changed. Do you think it's changed at all with your daughter coming into profession, or I mean, I guess when you're sitting around the dinner table and you're talking with her, what what type of advice you're giving her? Same thing we're talking about here in terms of become a good doctor first.
Yeah, and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
She's 2.5 years out of school. She's had a couple of different jobs. She's doing a little bit of general practice and a little bit of ER right now. Just a couple of weeks ago, she sent me a text that she was dealing with her first dystocia, which is a mother dog having difficulty delivering its babies. And, we started to talk about doing a C-section. And, those are the types of things. She would send me lab work and x-rays and all sorts of different things, which are fun. We talk business as well. She texted me from the recent Fetch conference in Charlotte, where she was sitting around with some other young doctors talking about why don't hospital owners listen to their young associates who want to give them advice? Why do they just shine them on and ignore them? And I said, you know what, we need to do a podcast on that,
Yeah.
because it really reflects upon the fact that they think more highly of themselves than they should, and they're not allowing for ideas that can come from other people. Whether Brooke will own a veterinary hospital or not, I don't know.
Right.
She enjoys doing what she's doing. I think she would be a great owner because she is very compassionate about the team. She has sent me a number of texts and emails wondering how she can get her team more supported from the leadership with whom she's working. And to me, that reflects really well on a young doctor who realizes that the team is what makes her successful. And whether she heard that from me, whether she gleaned it on her own, I don't care. She just got the right, she's got the genetic mutation which came from me. But I
Yeah.
think she's the generation that I want to see take on the leadership roles going forward. And I think the Gen Zs, the Gen Ys, can create a new profession going forward. It doesn't have to be what I did in the past and what some of the other veterinarians with whom you've worked on in the past, but we can create a whole new generation of veterinary medicine that meets the needs of the high tech, high touch world that's out there, and we just have to start to think about what that's going to look like and give people the tools and the resources to become successful.
I can't even imagine, being a father myself of 3 daughters. I can't imagine how, the feeling that you must have. You're on the phone with her and you're talking with her. You're going over X-rays or you're talking about a business point. How proud you must feel as a father, having those conversations. Actually, being able to bounce off of her father from your experience. No, it doesn't mean she's got to take everything, but she's got an ear that she can bend at any given time. That's got to be a great feeling for her, and especially for you.
Yeah, it's interesting because her sister, who has a business degree, we talk business. So she'll
Right.
call me, and she's a sales manager now for NetSuite software, and she'll call me and talk about managing people, or she'll talk to me about some of her frustrations with this multi-billion-dollar company for whom she works. And so it's been fun to use both of my degrees to help both of my kids work towards their long-term goals.
Right.
I am very proud of both of them. I'm very proud of what they have accomplished. I like to joke that they're both off the Verizon plan. They're both off the Netflix subscription. And then, of course, I got a text this morning that says, "Hey, can you help me log into Disney Plus later today?"
Oh,
So,
that's great. So wait a minute. So okay. So you had me going there for a few minutes because I'm not. They're all on the plan over here. So eventually they do get off of the plan somewhat. I guess what you're telling me. It's good.
yes.
No, that's good. So you mentioned podcasts. You know, talk to me a little bit about the podcast that you do with Dr. Nelson. Why did that start? What issues are you tackling? You find most important because it's called Courageous Conversations for a reason.
Yeah, it started almost 6 years ago, just after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I grew up in New York during the 70s, and we were fairly open-minded about things, but it was still, we were fairly, we were aware, I was aware of the racial discrimination and some of the issues that were going on in the South. And I was like, I looked at what was going on, and I was a big follower of Martin Luther King, and I said, we're going backwards. And so I picked up the phone and I called Phil Nelson, who was at that point in time the dean at Western University. And I said, Phil, help me out here. I just can't wrap my arms around what's going on in this country in terms of racism. And it feels like we're going back to the 60s instead of being progressive. And we started talking. And we did a follow-up call, and then we started to record our conversations. And then, we just continued to have these conversations, as it's going to be 6 years in June, about social issues in the United States. He grew up in Jackson, Mississippi in the 60s. I grew up in New York in the 60s. Kind of different lifestyles. And, he gives me a hard time about my white privilege. And it's like, well, I can't deny it.
Right.
And then we talk about issues within the veterinary profession, whether they're academic issues. We just did some talks on cost of care and access to care issues. There's so much been going on in the world, society. So I would suggest our main theme has been addressing societal issues. And our focus or premise is you got to have the courageous conversation. We thought that the image that we had when we started to have this was two neighbors talking across a hedgerow while you're washing the car or
Right.
cutting the grass, and then moving on to the porch and having a beer or whatever and having the conversations. And I think we as a world need to have these difficult conversations, not with animosity, but with curiosity. And I think we've got such a polarized community, and in many cases we're dealing with it in the profession as well, that we have lost the ability to listen and to communicate and recognize that other people's opinions aren't wrong. It's just their perspective. And so the theme for a lot of what we talk about is just the different perspectives that we have and different perspectives that others have.
It sounds like you could touch on that topic your daughter mentioned to you about the lack of communication or, respect for a younger veterinarian. Because if they're going to, practice is going to thrive, they got to rely upon their young veterinarians. Or that, to your point, that young veterinarian may not want to stick around there and they may want to leave. And I know one of the biggest issues we deal with our clients is just not having enough veterinarians. So you certainly want to keep the good ones. And I know you've also talked about this too. Now, looking, in the future, next 3 to 5, maybe 7 years, hopefully that's going to change with the new schools opening up. There'll be more doctors coming into the industry, and hopefully that void will be filled.
Yeah, workforce is an interesting dilemma right now. I can argue multiple ways that we have a variety of coexisting issues that have made that have challenged the veterinary profession. Workforce is a combination of filling the funnel, but also retaining. And we've had retention problems, both within practices, goes back to your toxic workforce question before, and within the profession globally, where people burn out and leave clinical practice after 3 to 5 years and go on to do other things within the profession, which is fine. Um, we also have huge efficiency issues. And if we were more efficient, greater utilization of our team goes back to initial
Right.
conversation. Might we need more staff and less doctors? And right now, we're also seeing economically a flattening of transactions. So businesses have slowed. Now, if we fill the void with doctors and people aren't coming in the door, we may be doctor heavy.
Hmm.
And then what happens then? So, could we at some point in time end up seeing salaries back down instead of continue to grow? And we could also discuss whether salaries have grown too rapidly or whether we've just normalized where salaries needed to be. And there's a whole bunch of economic issues that we could get into discussing, because I think what we've seen is an affordability problem for consumers. Um, you have pets
Yeah.
besides kids.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you may be an attorney, but when you go in and bring your pets in, it is not a budgeted line item. And
No.
so when you get a veterinary bill, even though you are a successful attorney, it doesn't mean you don't shake your head and say, "Oh my God." Just like when I get a legal bill, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm not going to shake my head and say, "Oh my God."
What are you
So
talking about?
affordability has become an
Right.
issue.
Right. Right. You're right. No,
So
it's true. You're right. It's funny. We've been fortunate, knock on wood, with my dog. We haven't had any um, major issues that really, would be significantly, you know, require surgery or something along those lines. And that's where you're really talking those bills. Just talking about routine medicine, keeping her healthy. It's expensive. And of course, my dog has allergies, so I have to get special food for her. And we do it because she's part of our family. But you're right, it's expensive. You know.
well, and it's expensive because we're just not prepared for it. We've also seen cost of care escalate in the veterinary field at a rate higher than the national inflation rate, which maybe it's a normalization. Maybe we should have been higher over time, and it's
Right.
just that it was an acute change. And it's like when you have a pebble in your shoe, you get used to it. When somebody drops a rock on your foot, you feel it. And
Yeah.
so we have escalated a lot of things, and rapid change is going to be much more discomforting than slow change. And so it's a very interesting time in the veterinary profession. It's an interesting time for you
Hmm.
in the legal side because of all of the different things that are going on uh, nationally and even statewide. It's an interesting time for me because of the business of the profession, which is an area that I'm interested in, of all of the new technologies that's out there, AI,
Right.
telehealth, computers. And it's an interesting time because of people. And this is a people profession, it's a service industry. And we can't forget that we need to have great people to take great care of the Peter Tanella family pet. And,
Yeah.
and without that service, Peter Tanella can go find someplace else that will give him what he's looking for.
100%. It's more than just transactional. Where I go, I've been going for the past 5 years. My doctor, he sold to corporate um 4 years ago. He's still there, but when he leaves, I'm going to go somewhere else because I don't have a relationship with anyone, and they've never made any effort. And I'm not shy about that. And I mean, there's been no effort to me or my family, my wife, to say, "Hey, let's get let's get the Tanellas in here. Let's talk with them." I know my doctor, who's old school. He'll text me. Still talks on a Saturday. Talk with my wife on the phone. It's just different. So and that's what I'm used to, and that's what I expect. So
Right.
it's be interesting what happens. I know us and what I see with our clients. I always look at the benchmark of 2023. Back before then, obviously, as you know, there were so many practices, corporate transactions going on. Now, at any given time, we probably have a handful of those. There's so much independent work, which I know you'd like to hear, and what I like, because I really find that interesting, that we're doing now more so than ever, between startups, associate buy-ins, practices opening up. There's a lot of that going on, so it is an exciting time, and I'm interested to see what's going to transpire over the next 3 to 5 years. The new schools opening and what the industry is going to look like. Because I feel fortunate to be a part of it in a very small way.
Well, I want to challenge you with something.
Yeah.
Because to me, one of the missed opportunities of 2020s going forward is one of the great opportunities we had in the 80s and 90s, which is the internal sales of practices to associates.
Yes.
And I think that one of the targets, one of the goals, one of the aspirations would be to help owners and associates become partners, and then through a staggered buy-in or however we want to do it, transition the legacy from me to the doctor sitting next to me instead of to somebody who's outside of the practice. So we keep that generational thing going on, and it doesn't have to be father and son or mother and daughter or mother and son or mother.
Right.
But I how do we help encourage current owners to look next to them and to help that associate, give them the tools to be ultimately successful as a hospital owner? It's not a competition, which is really what I think becomes a problem. It's not a competition between the seller and their associate. It should be a collaboration, because the best deal is going to be the one with somebody who's going to carry on your legacy. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of that.
No, I completely agree with you. And you're asking the question, I think, how do we encourage that? I think you'd appreciate that by education, because I think a lot of practice owners don't understand, or just they're not aware of it. In the last 24 hours, I've had 3 conversations, 3 separate clients, in terms of educating them on options that they have with the associates in their practice. How do I know, what can I do to incentivize them? What can I do to transition ownership to them for succession planning? And there's different options involved. And I always use the analogy, if I come into your practice, you're going to say, Peter, here are the options. And I'm going to say, Dr. Weinstein, I'm okay with the option 1, but 2 and 3, I'm just not comfortable with. That's our job as the attorney, explaining what the options are, pros and cons, and then saying, okay, what is your goal here? What do you want to achieve? And then they could check the box, say, you know what, I'm okay with option 1, but option 2 and option 3, which is part of the conversation I had over the last 24 hours, some of my clients, and saying, you know what, we really want to transition some equity to them. We don't want something to be synthetic, what they call that, where it's, it's contractual. They don't really have equity. So it's an interesting conversation, but to your point, I think it starts with education and explaining, and whether they're going to seminars, they're listening to webinars and educating themselves, because there is definitely a desire for it, Peter. I said in 2023, before 2023, we did not see as many associate buy-ins. It was during that window of time when the corporation spiked. Before that, yes, we were doing a lot of it, but now it's just, I think the pendulum has shifted, where so many of our practice owners are looking to get equity or build a succession plan with their associates, which I love, because those are really fun to work on. To your point, it's a win-win at the end of the day, because you're continuing the legacy. I had a client on here a couple months ago. He sold 49% to his associate. It was a great conversation. Then I had his associate on, and we had a great conversation. He explained to me why he did what he did, how happy he is. Yeah, he said, I could have entertained a corporate offer. He goes, that's not what I wanted. I couldn't have been happier. And it's a great story that the two of them have made together. I think it's just educating them on what you can do.
So I guess our message together here is that the 2 Peters, and any other Peters who want to join us, I think more than two Peters is a really difficult conversation. But anybody who wants to join the two Peters in conversations on legacy ownership, we are all over it. How can we help create the next generation of hospital owners from the associates that are sitting right next to you in your doctor's office? And I would also suggest maybe even minority owners that are your manager and your technician, if your state allows that.
Yep.
Because I think if we really want to keep a relational business, it's all about building the relationships that are just right there in our own four walls and not looking outside of those four walls, which also means not being overly selfish in what you need to exit, because the money, the golden goose that is out there that is throwing money at you, is not necessarily going to protect your legacy as much as the people who are sitting around you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and Peter, I'm so glad you mentioned the staff, and that's something I had the conversation last night with a client in Colorado. It's not only the two associates there, staff. It's very important to our client. How do they become owners in the practice? And again, different options there. And I'm so glad you raised that. Peter, where can somebody go who's listening connect with you to learn more about what you're doing, where you may be speaking? Is there somewhere where they can go?
LinkedIn is the best thing. I'm on Facebook minimally. I'm on Instagram just because my kids are on Instagram. LinkedIn is the best place to find me. If you're wanting to learn more about hospital ownership, veterinaryownship.advocates.com, which is www.voa.vet. Got some other businesses. One is on controlled substance compliance, simple solutions for vets, which is ss4v.vet. And we'll be launching a company this fall, probably if not sooner, that is all about systems, processes, and checklists. And that'll be sopveterinarian.com. So I got all of these little businesses out there trying to make the profession better. If you're listening to this and you've heard the conversation about being a successful business owner and you're looking for some help, voa.vet is all about creating the next generation of hospital owners and giving you the tools to be successful.
Peter, thank you. And we'll drop that in the links when we drop this podcast. We'll put those links in it. So that's great in the post. So thank you for joining me on Just Vetting, Peter. It's great to have you. It's always good seeing you.
Thank you, Peter, and it's great to see you as well. I look forward to seeing you when our paths may cross again sometime this summer. And keep up the great work in supporting the profession. And to all my veterinary friends out there, keep your friends close and your attorneys closer.
Thanks, Peter.